Okay, so we are now at our final lecture, not only of Julia Cassaniti's Living Buddhism, but also of the semester. So we're looking at part 3 now on karma, and we start with chapter 5, cause and effect. So, like the previous sections in the previous chapters, we see that this one also starts off with a kind of a key concept, the idea of sabajai, to be joyous, to be at ease, to be happy, to have a good heart. Now, or not a good heart in the sense of a heart that does good, but a heart that feels good. So sabajai is this cultural concept that she's drawing on. So what does it imply? Well, Gao tells Cassaniti that if you have a good, comfortable heart, if you sabajai, or we could say if you have contentment, then good things will happen to you. So on the one hand, then it's this idea that good things come to people with good hearts, but that even when bad things should occur to you, it's easier for you to deal with them. It's easier for you to let them go so that their impact on you is smaller, more manageable. It's easier for you then to carry on and have done with whatever has happened to you. Whoops. This then is a sort of colloquial rendering of karma, which is also captured by a proverb that Cassaniti says she encountered over and over again. The proverb goes like this: Tam di dai di, tam chuai dai chuai. Chua, excuse me. It is literally do good, receive good, do ill, receive ill. So a comparable sort of English idiom would be you reap what you sow. If you do good, you receive good. If you do wickedness, wickedness is perhaps a better translation of chua than is doing ill. So we'll say if you do wickedness, you receive wickedness. It also helps maintain that kind of moral valence to it as well. She says, as a description of moral causation, karma is about actions that carry with them the seeds of their effects. So these effects can appear in different parts of your life, or they can have different appearances within your life. So it can have to do with your health, it can have to do with your fortunes, the comfort of your life, the comfort that you're born into, if you're born wealthy or if you're born poor, or the suffering that you endure, if that suffering is great from, again, say from poverty and misfortune, or if that suffering is very small because your karma is good. You've accumulated merit this is a question, in previous lives or during this life. We'll come back to that. So then while the exact mechanism and timing of the return of the karmic yield for current actions it's a little bit mysterious, right? It's not obvious whether doing good now will provide you with a karmic payback in this life, or if you have to wait until the next life. There are different schools of thought on this. So the timing, also the mechanism of how it will work is not entirely clear, especially you can imagine if you make merit in this life, you make a lot of merit in this life, let's say. So you've banked, in a sense, a lot of merit. But if you continue to have misfortune in this life, then what does that tell you? Does that tell you that there's something off about this notion of sort of karmic payback, that good comes to those with good hearts, that good comes to those who do good? Or does it tell you only that, well, you're not going to get it until your next life, in which case, in a sense, there are no witnesses to how this happens. So then the mechanism, as I say, it remains somewhat mysterious. Unless, according to one of the monks' Cassaniti interviews, you're able to overcome the ignorance that makes it appear mysterious. And in his view, then, the only way that you can overcome this this ignorance that makes karma seem mysterious is through study and meditation and being advanced in merit and karma yourself. On the other hand, though, so we have that sort of mysterious part of it. But on the other hand, people in Majing just take karma to be as obvious as gravity. That, of course, if you do good, you'll receive good. If you do ill, you'll receive ill. It's like any other law of cause and effect. It is that obvious. So to this end, Cassaniti writes, people in Majing, for the most part, concurred in naming karma as the causal source for everything, along with, rather than in competition with, other kinds of explanations. So I'll just pause there. So then karma doesn't exclude other explanations. So then you got in the car crash because you were drunk while you were driving, of course, duh, but also because that's your karma. You won the lottery because of karma, not because of just the luck of your numbers coming up or what have you. Okay, so she continues. It can be thought of as part of the webs of significance that make up the cultural fabric of everyday life. Now, this phrase, webs of significance, should be familiar to us. It's a passage from Geertz from his essay on thick description. And so we have an interesting nod here toward the idea of karma and the sort of social role that it plays in connection to Geertz's ideas of interpretive anthropology, and that what we study as anthropologists is how we make these webs of significance within which we ourselves live. Moving on. We get a glimpse of the expectations of villagers for this time lag between one's current karmic acts and their blooming, when Cassaniti tells you that if you tambun, that is, do good deeds, make merit, then you will be born into a better life. So that sounds like the time frame is you make merit in this life, you reap it in the next life. So that the potential to reap the rewards of merit making in this life are actually nil on this view. As I say, this is not the only view, but this is the widespread view. Indeed, this is the view that I encountered most when I was in Thailand as well, that you don't expect to get the benefits of your meritorious acts in this life. You expect to get them in the next life. Equally with bad acts. If you tamba, that is sin, do ill, then you'll reap those rewards as well in your next birth. Rewards, not the right word, but you'll pay for that then in your next life, in your next birth. So then the idea here seems to be that the collective karmic payload, the sum total of all of your meritorious and sinful acts or deleterious acts over your life will express themselves in your next life, that they're not going to express themselves in this life. But at the same time, people will make merit before buying lottery tickets. So there is some sense that perhaps there is a shorter time frame as well that people are banking on when they buy lottery tickets. Of course, most lottery tickets, the overwhelming majority of lottery tickets don't win. So then there's maybe something more going on here, and maybe the expectations for the work that making merit will do in your life are adjusted to the time frame as well. Whatever the time frame for effects, though, there is still this underlying assumption that karma is causal, that there is a law of cause and effect here. It's less clear, though, whether good karma and bad karma, boon and bap, merit and demerit or sin, whether they weigh against each other. So whether doing a whole lot of awful things in this life and then doing a whole lot of good things will balance out, or whether doing a whole lot of good things in this life will counteract the bad acts that you've inherited from your previous life. This is unclear whether it will work that way, whether there's a kind of zero-sum scenario at work. A further puzzle, then, is that the goal of Buddhism is not, in fact, to accumulate good merit, but is to escape karma entirely, good or bad karma, and that accumulating merit is not actually a way to achieve Nibbana or Nirvana. Nirvana is then the state of having extinguished karma. So you have no more karma. You don't have good karma. You don't have bad karma. You've obliterated karma entirely. And that allows you then to escape the cycle of rebirths. So then these are further puzzles. Again, the mechanisms for these things are not entirely clear. And it's possibly a little bit confusing because it seems like that it has people working at cross purposes. People are continuously trying to make merit, to accumulate good karma, and yet the ultimate goal is not to accumulate more good karma. It's to extinguish karma entirely. Part of this confusion comes from a tension between two schools of Buddhism, and they are both present in Thailand. The predominant one orients to this idea of gaining merit, so that you're constantly looking for ways that you can achieve greater merit. The other, it has a smaller but a very significant following, and traditionally it's been very popular among sort of professional Thai people like doctors, lawyers, people like that. This one is not seeking to gain merit. This one is seeking Nibbana, Nirvana, the extinction of karma, or the extinguishing, I should say, of karma in one's own life. So these two schools, they wind up having multiple divergences. They diverge politically. I consider them in my book on human rights and the way that they generate different possibilities. On the one hand, for committing acts of violence and murder on the basis that killing some kinds of people will bring you merit if it's in defense of Buddhism, if it's in defense of the nation, if it's in defense of the king. The idea is that killing opponents of those things will bring you merit, so you should do it. On the other hand, you have this other model of Buddhism oriented toward nirvana, and based on the notion that nirvana is in principle something that anybody can achieve at any time. So it's not just the domain of those who have generated a great deal of merit, but it is available to anyone. So that, again, the idea there is that accumulating more merit, good karma, doesn't actually help you achieve nirvana, that extinguishing your karma entirely, that's what gets you to nirvana. And so that all of this merit making can be possibly a bit of a distraction, a bit of a distraction from the real point of Buddhism. So these are schools that are in tension with each other, in other words, and they have different ideas then about how you ought to spend your time in your life. Cassaniti, perhaps not surprisingly then, does not find a consensus in Meijing on the relationship between old karma, that is, the karma that you've inherited from your previous lives, and the merit one can make in this life. Some saying that you cancel out old karma with merit. Others saying that no matter what you do, you have to work out old bad karma, that it has to run its course, and that the merit that you make in this life is not going to mitigate that. But now to get back to Cassaniti's central question, what is the relationship of karma to emotion? We learn that what makes an action karmically good or bad is the intention behind it. We've seen this come up already in previous chapters, right? So that the good or ill of an act doesn't appear in the consequences of the act. It appears in the intentions with which you perform the act. So that even something like one of the most meritorious things a layperson can do, giving food to a monk as they come around on their daily their daily trips through the village, say, with their begging bowls to get food from the villagers. Giving food to them is among the most meritorious things that you can do. But if you do it with ill will, if you're not possessed of the right intentions as you do it, then it's actually not going to gain you merit after all. So then it's all about intention. How then does this relationship of intention and karma work? Well, Cassaniti runs into this metaphor of a plant. She's already alluded to it earlier in the chapter. The seed of your karma is intent. Intent is driven by desire. Desire, in its turn, is based on attachments, longing for permanence. So we've seen this in the case study that she's already worked through with Sen. Sen is ill because he can't give up his attachments. Now, Sen would seem to be a case, then, in which the inability to give up attachments, and therefore his sort of possession by desire, has immediate effects in this life. So they don't wait until the next life to appear. They appear in this life, even though the attribution that many people make will be to his karma inherited from previous lives. So again, there's a little bit of confusion even in his case, but the point seems to be that desire is based on attachments, longing for permanence, and that generates suffering. So that the way that desire influences intent is crucial. Intent, then, driven by desire, which is based on attachment, bears karmic fruit. Now, if the intent, though, is good, then the fruit that it bears will also be good. So if you give freely and happily to the monk or to the temple or to a hospital or a school and so on, then you will receive merit as a result. She says, acting with good intention produces good results. Acting with bad intention produces bad results. Acting without intention, on the other hand, means acting without desire. This, as I said, sort of captures the different orientation of the different schools, the merit-oriented school versus the nirvana-oriented school. As I was told again and again, making merit is about acting with a certain emotional countenance, a particular affective demeanor. Bad karma is made with bad feelings at play, feelings that include selfishness, ill will, and robust emotion. Now, if most people focus on making good karma, making merit, how does one do that? How does one plant the seed for good karmic fruit? Well, she learns that there are three ways. First of all is by giving. As I said, giving food to a monk, giving a donation to a temple or a hospital or a school. So these kinds of selfless acts, of course, done with the right intention. Second is to follow the Buddhist precepts. So there are 5 Buddhist precepts that lay people are supposed to follow. Monks have many, many more that they need to follow. But the 5 precepts that lay Buddhists are supposed to follow are avoid killing, avoid stealing, avoid excessive pleasures, avoid wrong speech, and avoid intoxicants. It's generally phrased in a different way than this, but for economy, I've just rephrased it like this, around avoidance. Anyway, the third one then is to engage in Buddhist meditation. Of course, part of the idea there also is that meditation will give you greater insight. It will move you toward enlightenment. It will remove the ignorance that makes all of this mysterious. This is part of the point that the monk who Cassaniti interviewed, the points that he was making. So then, good and bad karma are important issues in Maijing. We saw that they are less so in the Karen village, Ban Kotao, that was Christian. But in Maijing, this Buddhist village, good and bad karma are important because karma is this all-encompassing explanation. It's this explanatory force for whatever happens to people. And indeed, she says that even the tsunami that was vivid enough in people's memories, even at the time that she was there doing her field work. So the tsunami struck late in December in 2004, and even a decade later, it was still very much alive in people's memories. Even that, people explained by karma, right? So that something that for all the world appears to be a natural disaster, they would say that there's a karmic explanation, that the people who were affected by that were experiencing the expression of their karma from their previous lives. So then it's a pervasive explanation. And as Sen's condition deteriorates to this near fatal degree, he and his family and his friends were told by doctors he's going to die. The question is whether it's in a couple of months or maybe a year, but that his liver had essentially shut down from all of his drinking, from basically a year of constant drinking. So then, as his condition deteriorated to this point where he was literally on death's bed, his mother attributes it to her karma as well as to his. Curious move. And if karma is the explanation for everything, then letting go, tamjai, is the response. It seems as if Cassaniti explores not what these things might be, so to speak, in themselves, but what they mean in Maijing. That this is the crucial thing, that it's their meaning that informs people's actions and behaviors. That's what's informing their practices. That's what's informing their orientation toward making merit. That's what's informing their emotional dispositions. Another way of saying this then is that she shows that what they mean is what they are. So what is the nature of Sen's suffering? It is the natural consequence of his failing to let go of attachments. Karma here is only what it means to the people who invoke it. Okay, the conclusion to the book then, acting a part. Cassaniti recalls a couple of moments from the previous chapter and from other parts of the book when she starts the conclusion. So one is this statement from Gail that people with good hearts, sabajai, can let go and feel okay, even in the face of bad things happening to them. They can let go. They can feel okay. They can accommodate themselves to the circumstances. The other thing that she points to is how everyone takes Sen's illness and his recovery to be their doing, to be a reflection of their karma, of the merit that they made. But Sen claims that the real reason that he got better is because he finally let go. He let go of his attachments. And that was what pulled him through. So, in fact, Sen credits himself, in a sense, with his own recovery. All of this helps Cassaniti assess what she calls a local psychological model of health and well-being. Letting go of attachments sits at the heart of this model. So we'll notice then, this is not the psychological model that is prevalent in Western medicine or in Western university psychology departments. She's offering an alternative to those, the one that is prevalent in Meizheng. The lesson is that attitudes and emotions are, as she says, constructed in and through social context. So she's coming back to this idea that attitudes and emotions are not entirely subjective, not the product of the individual subject, not, so to speak, housed entirely within this encapsulated individual, the subject. Rather, they are the product of social context, that they are social constructions. This position contributes to a move away from the idea that agency, okay, what does she mean by agency? She says that agency refers to the ability to create change and act in the world. So if you are an agent, you are someone who can create change and act in the world. So she's moving away from agency that separates the agent or actor from cultural constraints and toward an idea of agency as occurring through culture. So the one that she's moving away from was an idea that was prevalent in the 80s and 90s, really. This idea that you showed your agency by being able to break from your cultural surroundings, by being able to resist and rebel against your cultural surroundings. What she's pointing to is a different notion of agency, a competing one really, that says that actually agency occurs through culture, not as a break with culture then. She says, if we think of culture as providing the conceptual space for possibilities, it makes sense that we can't act apart from culture any more than we can choose to breathe something other than the air around us. So that whatever our cultural milieu is, that is the milieu in which we act and on which we draw in order to act. Absent that cultural milieu, we don't act. At least we don't act in a social way. We are not agents. So another analogy, I think this might not be a perfect analogy, but hopefully it will help capture something of what she's driving at here, is that imagining that we can act apart from our culture is like imagining that we can speak outside of language, that there's a way that doesn't in fact make sense. She outlines her model like this. It's a long passage, but I think it's worth reading through the whole passage because of all of the paragraphs in the book, this probably condenses the overall thrust of the book more economically and more precisely than just about any other paragraph. So it's worth getting the whole thing. She says, the local model of personal agency that I've been drawing is different from models in the social sciences that privilege action on the world. It is oriented to particular kinds of emotional practices and religiously influenced ontological assumptions, ontology being thought of what is, thought about being. So influence ontological assumptions about what is, what constitutes the cosmos, that work to create effects through the acceptance of change. Let me read that sentence again. It is oriented to particular kinds of emotional practices and religiously influenced ontological assumptions that work to create effects through the acceptance of change. The model looks like this. Everything in the world changes, from the teaching of anitya, impermanence, and so getting stuck on some idea or person or thing will bring suffering because it won't last. Being aware of this impermanence and detaching from these things thus brings about positive results, and this detaching is practiced through the cultivation of calm, cool, affective orientations, as captured by making the heart in Tamjai. Merit making and the work of karma serve to mobilize the effects of these practices and socially reinforce the idea that following them creates positive change. I don't want to be too leading in this, but especially toward the end there, that to my ear sounds very reminiscent of a kind of a functionalist account of how merit making works socially. I'll come back to that right at the very end. An important observation arising from her model is that religion and culture cannot be distinguished from one another in everyday life, except in these specific limited ways. So that you can have things like religious rituals, clearly religious, right? Clearly, in some way, exceptions from everyday life. You can have other things that have little, maybe traces of religion in them, but really, for the most part, are completely a-religious. Things like going to the market to make to buy your vegetables. It's not obvious what the religious role would be in that. So that there are things on the far ends that can be distinguished as religious or completely irreligious, but that on the whole, the way that social life is lived in a place like Majiang, the religious and the cultural can't really be drawn apart from one another. They're knit into one another in a way that, to me, it's tempting to say that religion is simply one type of cultural expression. So that not all cultural expression is religious, but some is. And that's what, in this case, would be explicitly Buddhist. Her point, I take it simply, is that it's a bit of a fool's errand to try and rigorously distinguish these things from one another as if there are clear demarcations between them. Here is the religious, here is the cultural. No, she's saying that they are interknit with one another in ways that you can't simply separate them apart, except in very, very limited cases. So then you could also say that she's making a case not just for kind of a Buddhist psychology, but it's also a certain kind of a cultural psychology, unless you understand Buddhist as already cultural and not simply religious. The important thing for Cassaniti is that we examine Buddhism as lived in everyday life, right? So what is the cultural expression of Buddhism? Or alternately, how is Buddhism in everyday life a cultural expression? She says, so she wants to examine it by showing how people are living Buddhism in ways that are always personal and idiosyncratic, but that also do make use of shared Buddhist ideas and ideals. I am, in effect, suggesting a move away from the study of authority or authenticity as residing in virtuosos and a move toward regular people as sources of knowledge and religious traditions. So there's a temptation in many religious studies, I think this is what she's nodding toward, to think that the way that we get at the heart of a religious practice or a religious doctrine is that we go to the experts, that we learn about Buddhism from the monks, and in particular, not just any monks, but the most learned, elevated monks. Those are the ones who we go to, because they're the ones who have expertise. She's saying that actually, no, really the interesting thing about Buddhism is not that sort of rarefied kind of Buddhism, but rather the way that it gains expression, gains life within the everyday lives of villagers. And that they are perfectly good. In fact, they are the supreme expression of what Buddhism is. Why? Because they are living it every day. They are incorporating it into their everyday lives. Why? Because it has explanatory force for all of them within their everyday lives. And if you want to see how it has explanatory force, if you want to see how it influences behavior, practice, social relations, you get that by seeing the way that it appears in their everyday lives. So we can see then that throughout the book, she emphasizes not only shared practices and their role in ordinary social life, but also shared meanings as they appear in everyday life. I don't want then to weigh on one side or the other to say that that we can see mostly a sort of functionalist account or mostly an interpretivist account. Indeed, I think that most of the work that she's doing is within sort of the anthropological variant of social psychology. But that the way that these other anthropological traditions arise in her work, not always named as such, is still important because we can see how they're giving a certain kind of shape to her investigation and how they're giving particular kinds of explanatory tools that allow her to investigate the way then that Buddhism is, to sort of borrow from the title, alive in the everyday, alive in people's ordinary lives. And that brings us to the end of the semester and the end of the book. I hope that this has been as rewarding for you as it has been for me. And thank you very much for listening.